Yes, hello and welcome to the actual first. We just finished a year. This is the 13th meeting. So our first meeting was last April when we open sourced StackRox for the first time. So those following along, thanks for making it through a year. We appreciate it. Along with a year of open source StackRox, we also have 4.0 release coming out. So we'll be chatting about that. I'm one of your co-chairs, Michael Foster, and I'm joined by my other co-chair, Matthias Mettinger. So we are looking forward to hopefully an insightful meeting. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave them in the document. And of course, just feel free to jump in. It's an open dialogue. But on the agenda, we're going to be talking 4.0, the release date, the main features that are coming up, any questions that you have about the release, how to manage it, upgrade, and install it. And then we're just going to be going through the user issues that we've collected over the last month, anything that has been somewhat answered, but we hope to clarify. And if we don't, we'll get an engineering resource to help out as well. With that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Matthias to talk about 4.0 updates and the new features.
Yeah, so actually I hadn't had it on my mind that it's been almost exactly a year since we open sourced that we now have another big announcement to make, which is 4.0. So 4.0 is actually packed. So we have a lot of stuff that is going to change. And also we have a release date internally that we are planning, but especially as it's a big release, we want to be on the safe side. So I can tell you right now, we are on track. We are planned to release in a little bit later this month, but we'll update you on a specific date when we have more, when we have a little bit more clarity on actually how and when that's going to be. So with that update, what's going to what's going to happen for you folks is the main and biggest change is we are changing the default database that Central is actually running on, or not, basically not only Central, but a lot of the data keeping of our platform is currently running on an internal database, which we are switching to Postgre. Which means with 4.0, we will switch to Postgre. You will see a new database container. And what that also means is that we will deprecate the current internal database. So be mindful of that. Usually deprecation, as soon as it's announced, I don't know from the top of my head, but I don't think we have announced the deprecation of the current database just yet. But if we announce it from that point on, we usually give it 2 to 3 releases. So 6 to 9 months roughly to actually phase that out. With that change, as Postgre is a big upgrade, we actually also decided to switch our default channels for the operator. So if you use ACS with an operator, you will not get an automatic upgrade to 4.0. You actually will have to manually go in there and change the channel from the default channel from latest to stable. So currently the ACS operator always updates on the latest channel. From 4.0 on, we will start using the stable channel. This is mainly to prevent auto upgrades to 4.0. So if you want to upgrade and you're running on the operator, make sure to actually check our upgrade documentation and switch the default channel. And with that, we also have more exciting features to actually introduce in 4.0. So we will introduce for the OpenShift folks, we will introduce RHCOS node scanning, which is a feature that basically gives you vulnerability insight into the actual nodes. So currently we are primarily looking at the Docker and Kubernetes runtime, as well as some other basic information about a node. With 4.0, we actually started also looking at package vulnerabilities, so installed packages and maybe and basically all the language components, all the system components that we can find through the package database. Also, with the
I was going to
last,
say real
yeah,
quick, Matthias, because we have Boaz on the line.
yeah.
We're actually looking for some clarification. Network Graph 2.0, heard a lot of great feedback visually, a tremendous improvement. Just curious on what the plan is for the Network Graph 2.0 in the newest release. Do you have any updates on that one, Boaz? You are muted. Yeah. Although I appreciate you coming on. We got somewhat of a packed
Hey.
house. There you
Yeah,
go.
thanks, guys. Hey, great to be here. So yeah, thanks. We did have great feedback. We are announcing the deprecation of Network Graph 1.0. That said, it will still be there for the duration of 2 releases. And the biggest change, and the reason why we're actually bothering, like we don't need permission to change a feature, but the reason we're doing this is because we're taking away some functionality, specifically the ability to apply a network policy from within the network graph. We are not doing that anymore. And the reason is that we believe people should apply network policies outside and during their automation. This feature was here for historical reasons. I would say we've never recommended using it, so we're finally taking it up. So that said, we are recommending people to move and start working with 2.0.
Awesome. So a couple of releases, it will be just 2.0 as the default. And I'm assuming the 2.0 is going to be dropped. It's just going to be network graph when that change finally happens. So that's awesome. Matthias, I know along with the Postgres change, that also means the collection feature is going to be permanent. So in 3.70, Boaz, you were also working on this. So the collection feature for policy, let's say scaling and management really helps a lot. You will only get that feature with the database upgrade. Do you want to talk about that at all as well?
I mean, thanks for the opportunity. It was with very limited exposure because obviously only people who had Postgres. So it's really, we just expect people to start seeing it now with Postgres becoming widely used. Anyone on 4.0 will get to just experience the collections. And as we've messaged in the past, and I guess it'll be good to just talk about what collections are good for, what are we planning to do with them. Their limited usefulness in 4.0 out of the gate. We are taking a phased approach. It's a pretty significant change. And so we want to learn as we go before we make really huge changes. And because collections are references that are resolved in runtime, they're extremely powerful, and they can create all kinds of weird situations where you can define things in different ways, and you can create conflicts. So without going into a deeper conversation, which I'd love to, if you want to set up time, I'd love to just talk about that. Right now, you can use collections in order to create your infrastructure for reporting all vulnerabilities. It's a really good exercise to start with. Pretty soon, we want to see collections used as filters. So eventually, filter anything using a collection is very powerful. So you don't have to go and do that one by one. This cluster, those deployments, those conditions, you'll be able to do that using collections. Policies is going to be a major feature that will rely on collections, but all of that is coming. It's going to take time.
Awesome. Yeah, for the reporting aspect, I think that's great. Being able to take a label, maybe it's, back end, front end team. If they bring any new resources up, it automatically gets added to their vulnerability report. That's the goal for reporting, correct?
That is. So
Yeah.
Fundamentally, the idea of collections is provide the users a language to describe their infrastructure. And because people like to think about a lot of customers want to think about their infrastructure as a hierarchical organization. So I might have a cluster for dev, a cluster for QA within the dev cluster. Matthias might be a privileged team that is a mature team. They're allowed to do anything they want. I'm not going to really want to have any violations or nothing reported for them. But then with Mike, I don't know. Mike's is just a beginner, and we want to make sure you do the right thing. Just teasing, obviously, but you can reflect on the different needs that different teams might have for vulnerability reporting, for policy violations, for enforcing and informing on policies. All it really provides a language for you to just define that once. You can do that today with labels, right? I mean, you can say, what's the big deal? I can add a label, and that then automatically my application is already defined by Kubernetes. The fact is that security organizations actually don't like that a lot because they don't have control. Mm-hmm. So this gives the organization the tools to work across between security and dev teams to agree on those terms. And so security can say, you know what? Okay, go ahead. You define that label. Any application comes up with that label, we'll treat it as, Mike's team. You can do whatever. We already agreed that you can. The security also can enforce it in different ways. So that's, in a nutshell, the idea behind collections. I hope that wasn't too confusing.
No, that wasn't. And I think we should definitely do a little bit more of a deep dive in the future once the release happens and once I get to play around with the feature a little bit more. Sure. Just moving on in the sake of time. Thanks for that, Boaz. Matthias, so we changing some of the default resources in the sensor. You want to expand on that a little?
Yes. So we have in the past, we have seen that actually sensor, especially in larger deployments, needs a little bit more of a bump. And to accommodate for that, so that everyone is aware, we are moving the requests the resource requests of sensor up a little bit, as well as the limits. So keep that in mind if you are running in a rather constrained environment, that the requests for RAM and CPU cores for sensor will change to 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM.
Now, just to be clear, those are the defaults. If you're running in a resource constrained smaller environment, you can obviously change that if you understand your resources that are necessary. This is just so that by default, especially in bigger environments, that everything will work smoothly, and it's a lot easier to shift down when you know your resource restrictions and requirements, correct?
Correct. So you can always go in and obviously adjust these, be it in the Helm values or even, I mean, we would recommend to do that in the Helm values or configuration, but you can, as always, do it what works for or do what fits your workflow best and how you actually deploy ACS. And with that said, additionally to that, if you are using RHCOS node scanning, there will be an additional container in the collector daemon set. So on each node, there will be one additional container running, which will add a little bit more to requested resources, because obviously we need an additional, or maybe not obvious, but we need an additional container that is actually in charge of scanning the node and actually inventorizing what's happening on the node.
Mm-hmm. And this is also from a security perspective, it's separated off. It has different permissions when it's scanning the node. So if you don't need that resource, it won't be there. That way, we can run minimally and not ask for more permission than we need. Correct?
Correct. So the additional node scanning container will only be there if you actually choose to use, if you run on OpenShift and you actually want to use or make use of the feature. It will, I think it will be, yes, there will be an additional feature, or not a feature flag. There will be an additional environment variable that you can set to actually switch that off, even if you're running on OpenShift and you don't want that feature.
Awesome. And I think we're on to our last point, Matthias.
Yes. So there is an additional point, which is we have permissions, or I think permission sets, we call them. So we have the analyst permission, and this one is a rather old permission, and it will change with 4.0. We had to adjust it a little bit. It used to be able to access administration resources, which it will not be able to anymore. There is a little bit more information on this in our changelog and also in our documentation, obviously, but this is the most important change of this role. So if you use an automation or an access token that is using the analyst permission set to do something in administrative resources of ACS, it might be a good idea to proactively create a new permission set that explicitly is allowed to access administrative resources and use that one instead of the analyst permission that you might be using today.
Gotcha. Before we get on the last question about beta test, does anybody that's on the call, Oscar, Boaz, Patrick, or Dane, have any questions about the release? Anything that is bubbling to the top of your mind? Silence is okay. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the Slack or in the document. We just try to collect everything and then talk about it every month. The last question about the release is there a beta test? So this was asked by Neil. Now, I know 3.74 comes with some of the features like Network Graph 2.0, Postgres not as a default database. So that could be somewhat considered the beta, but Matthias, just curious what your thoughts are on upgrading. You know, I don't think there's like an official beta build for people to test for 4.0, but having those features in 3.74 also allows people to test them out. Just want to throw it to you.
I think it is unprecedented so far, as at least since I joined StackRox. I don't think we ever had a beta. So I would argue we don't really do that in the traditional sense. What you can do, what Foster actually already hinted at, is 74. So the current release came with the option to enable Postgre as a database, which also brought with it the collections feature, the Network Graph 2.0, as well as some other under the hood improvements, which means if you want to actually test this, you could roll an upgrade to 74 with the database enabled. But the difference between migrating to 74 with the database flag enabled and upgrading to 4.0 is actually not that big. So technically we have invested a lot of time and testing into the documentation and testing all the different steps, including already writing and testing rollback documentation. So as always, we make very sure that you can always go back. But that said, as usual with upgrades, we would recommend to test this for your individual environment, because as it goes with Kubernetes deployments, these are highly specialized and there is no way that we could cover every possible scenario. So to be on the safe side, I would recommend to always test in a staging or dev environment before upgrading prod.
Cool.
Maybe I can add something.
Sure.
So like Matthias said, Red Hat, at least in our scope, we don't do beta, but we have technology preview features. So Postgres in 3.74 was already technology preview, which meant anyone could play it. It was in the release notes, and we encouraged people to test it out. But we also worked actively with a few customers to make sure we do test that in as a realistic environment as we can. Again, to Matthias's point, cannot emphasize this and underemphasize how important it is to test this, run your staging environment. This one part of the reasons this is a major release. It's a 4.0. So that, as Matthias said, the channel is updating. You're not going to automatically update to 4.0. You have to make a conscious decision. So it's all supporting our customers to take the right steps in doing so. That said, again, just repeating what Matthias has already told you, we have tested this deeply and we are confident that this is GA level. That's why we're announcing it GA. So you are supported in production. It's not that we're not telling you this wasn't tested. We don't know. We're not sure. We are sure it is tested. We encourage you to move to 4.0. A lot of features depend on Postgres, as you've already heard some. 374 was a stepping stone, and RoxDB is going away. There's no, and it's going away like quickly. So 4.0 is the way forward. It is fully GA, and we expect customers to use it. And I don't know if Matthias, you probably did say, but I'm not sure. We already run it in ACS as a service. We are using this technology already. So we have a lot of run hours already with it, and we're very confident with it.
I've actually not mentioned that, but yes, you're absolutely correct. We are also already running the Postgre version in our managed service already. So we were able to collect a little bit of, or actually a lot of runtime hours with it, and are reasonably sure that things work as we designed them. Gotta be very careful how to phrase these things because something can always go wrong, right?
The point is, and this is, I guess, the difference between open source and Red Hat. So like I said, we are confident. Of course, things can go wrong, but we are confident. It is fully GA, fully supported. So we are absolutely guiding people to move over to 4.0. It's not, there's not a lack of confidence or a debate there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So in the interest of time as well, should we get into the user issues, talk about comments? Certain ones we've answered in the chat, or for example, you know, we identify a gap. Can you open up a GitHub issue, something small? You'll see I put it in bold and answered in the doc. But I'm just going to talk about anything that we haven't got to in the chat. And Dane, thanks for the questions. I will definitely get to those as well at the bottom. So Victor asks, is it possible to use an external database for a scanner? Now, I don't have the answer to that. Matthias, I don't know if you're on the storage team either, but we might have to get back to you on this one. Anybody have an answer for this one?
Actually, Dane basically nailed the answer already, which is I have checked in with our scanner folks, and the scanner database by itself is something that can go away. So it is oh god, I forgot the term for it. But basically the DB can go away, which means it will
ephemeral.
be
Yeah.
thank you. So
Correct.
it will be rebuilt on the fly. So you can go in, and in the config map, you can actually change the connection string.
Oh.
But the question is, do you really need to?
Right. I mean, why?
Yeah.
I'm really curious about what the source of that question. Why would people want to do that?
I mean, you could argue that if you were to change to bring your own database, combined with if you have an existing Postgre running somewhere that is already running for something completely different, you could argue that there is an edge case where it would make sense to not use the scanner DB container, but instead have scanner point at that existing database. But the question is, how much sense would it make? Unfortunately, without knowing the exact use case that Victor has, it is hard to answer. So the answer to the question, the technical correct answer to the question is, you can change the connection string in the scanner config map, but that it will most likely be overwritten by the next Helm upgrade or operator upgrade. So it is not designed to stay permanently.
Makes sense. And Victor's comment is in the Slack channel. Victor, if you're watching this and you have anything else, just add to the thread. Boaz is in there, Matthias and I are in there. So If you want to clarify, happy to help out. Next question, are there any plans to release the Helm charts that support declarative ops? The current model is that you have to install one and then make some calls to feed into the next Helm chart, preventing it from being declarative. This is always a challenge with Helm charts, especially with the init bundle and the values that you need to connect to central. Where you store those, how you do upgrades is also a security risk. Right? Like if you do declarative ops and you do a CI/CD process for upgrading ACS, then you have to install those files, the secrets and cert files somewhere. So whether it be Helm or like a Vault or a secret integration, and then how do you call that? It does introduce all these various issues. So I don't really see a scenario where you can just inject secrets into your Helm charts unless it's pulling from your own, secret storage where you have Helm charts. You're gonna go pull the secrets of the init files and then do an upgrade. But Matthias, I'm not sure if you want to shed any light on that. I don't see a path forward where you have like the secrets in the Helm chart to make it all just declarative. You kind of have to have some sort of CI/CD process where you're using the init files to upgrade, correct?
As far as I'm aware of, yes. I know that there were some discussions or architectural design discussions about what we could change about the process. But honestly, I do not know from the top of my head the status of these, because it is actually a surprisingly hard problem to solve, because as you said, there is a multi-stage or step process that we need to follow for our platform to be up and running. There could be, obviously, there's always options to change these, but the question is, we usually try to, or we usually strive to improve the experience and for the user, or alternatively improve the ease of use for the whole platform. So the question would be, how can we construct a scenario where it actually improves the situation versus where we are today? So so long story short, I don't know where we are at that. I remember that we had some discussions about this, but I don't think I have spotted it in any roadmap of ours just yet. But if we get enough feedback from the community and the users, that is, as always, subject to change.
Yeah, I might take this as a to-do, because I think a use case showing maybe best practice might be in order, regardless of if the product or how we want to do that. It might just be, hey, this is where we recommend storing these files and upgrading using Helm charts moving forward. On to the last, well, there's a couple more questions, but Mike says, hello, we use ACS 3.74.1. Is there a way to generate network policy to include egress traffic? They add all the flow and baselines, but when you click the download baseline as network policy, they receive one YAML file with only one ingress rule. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Boaz, but egress traffic is in the roadmap, should be coming in the next few releases.
Actually,
no.
That's a fun question, isn't it, Matthias?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Because so the baseline, the network baseline by design only creates ingress policies, the whole network baseline in the runtime. But remind everyone this feature that Matthias and I have collaborated on, which we shipped as tech preview quite a few releases ago, allows you to generate network policies in build time. And these are, we actually think that is potentially the better path to take. This is a shift left approach. You can generate those network policies based on your YAML code. That's all it needs. If you don't need to do anything that you don't already do. If you're working with best practices, you would have all your YAML files that you're about to deploy. You run roxcutl. Correct me if I get this wrong. Generate netpol or netpol generate. I don't remember, because we said, so you run roxcutl generate netpol, right? Matthias, thank you. Yeah. And lo and behold, you're going to get a very tight specification that includes both ingress and egress policies. And so, yeah, go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, so what we actually do, and what Boaz so fittingly described, is currently we have two different mechanisms. We have one, which is you deploy something in a monitor cluster, and ACS will then generate a baseline out of it. This one doesn't generate egress rules today. What you can do is, instead of looking at deploy time or runtime, you can actually do a static analysis of your deployment files, which includes ingress and egress rules. And these tend to be in our testing, these were way tighter, because as we are doing static analysis, we don't need to wait for a cron job to run or anything else. So this you might miss in a 1 hour baseline, which is at runtime. But if you do a static analysis, you can actually see all the things that your deployment would reach out to or could reach out to. So we don't have egress traffic when you download these flows. That is correct. That is expected behavior of the platform. Again, even there may be subject to change, or even we might progress with the shift left approach and actually move that into build time, on the developers to actually generate the network policies before a deployment. And also, if I remember correctly, we might pick up on these features again very, very soon, right?
Yeah, timeline is always a beast. So what happens with build time in the future, I think, depends on you guys, on customer feedback. We really encourage people to go ahead and use the shift left approach. We've already had some really exciting feedback from people already using it. There's this really exciting demo that, Mike, you can maybe share when that's going to be published, that Rodrigo and Mike are working on, right? That really shows people how to bake this in their pipeline. So end-to-end automated creation of network policies all through your pipeline, automatically deployed into Kubernetes, which is the right way to go. I know, Mike, if you have a teaser on kind of when that video might be available.
No, I'll talk to Rodrigo about it. The only other question I have is this going to be built into the UI at all in the future, or is the move that, hey, we're using the CLI and that's what we're recommending moving forward?
Again, that's a really interesting one. I think that's part of what Matthias was referring to when we looked at this technology, especially, Matthias and I were just spending brainstorm time, and we came up with all sorts of interesting directions that we could go. And so we're definitely open to user feedback. But right now, what is clear is this solid approach that automated, people don't want to mess with it. So in fact, if you think about this problem, who wants to generate network policies? Raise your hands, right? So people just, it's something that they just want to get done for them. And that's what this technology does for you. It just generates it automatically. You can then debug it, just like you debug code. It should be part of the process. You debug code, you debug security, you debug network policy as part of the process. And then you ship it.
Gotcha.
So there shouldn't be too much of a need for UI. But that's going to be interesting as people pick it up. We'll see if people have different perspectives.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of my question is, Mike, obviously, I think possibly we should at least say that egress is through netpool generate, right, in
Right.
the UI to at least direct people to that, because he's obviously having this question where he's like, why am I only getting ingress here and not egress? So either we need to make it clear that netpool is the way forward, or add the egress ability to be able to generate it in the UI. I think both of those are fair. Look towards like an RFE or an issue getting created in the future. And then hopefully, if people want more of the netpool generate and maybe, the feature in the UI, then that's something we can put in the roadmap. But yeah, stay tuned for a demo on the netpool generate. Mike, I will at you when it comes out. All right, on to the last two questions. Dane, thanks for patiently waiting and putting them in at the end too. You could have put it up at the beginning and taken off, but really appreciate it. Any info on the new GitHub Actions? What is it intended to be used for? Image scanning and CI/CD. I'm assuming you're not talking about GitHub updates, but the actual GitHub Actions using RoxCuddle for scanning. If we had any thoughts on best practices, do you mind clarifying the question?
Actually, I'm not sure. I saw some PRs where they were just talking about GitHub Actions that were being created. Maybe it was totally all wrong then, and nothing happened.
I'm not sure, but I definitely think that going on the marketplace, it would be pretty useful to have some default GitHub Actions for StackRox and ACS, although that has its own, I think with the cloud service and with the ability to query automatically with a simple API token and string, that might be an option. But yeah, we have to think about that a little bit, Matthias.
Yeah, I think so currently what we do is we recently got new members in our infrastructure team. And these folks have been at work to actually migrate parts of our internal build automation onto GitHub Actions. So that might be the reason why you have seen discussions about GitHub Actions here and there recently in StackRox, in the repositories on GitHub.
Okay, thank you.
Gotcha. And then the last one is, will the upgrade process to a new external Postgres central database ingest the existing internal database?
Yeah, for that one, I've been already combing through our upgrade documentation, and I remember that even though we have code freeze, we don't have documentation freeze yet. So the documentation is still in the process of being written. As far as I remember, there was discussions about migration. So I remember that we definitely have migration instructions so that data is moving over or is migrated into Postgre. But I'm at the moment unable to find them. So if I find them or come across them, I will definitely let you know. I'm very sure that we have them, but I don't know where. I mean, both looks like
yeah. No, you're right, because we're racing against the clock here. Documentation isn't published yet, but of course, yes, it is. The migration is automatic. In fact, fun fact, and Dane, I was just reviewing the operator-based instructions, and in the do you use operator, Dane, or are you just using Helm?
We're just using the Helm charts.
Okay, so it'll just be an indication though, because with the operator, there's actually a field in 374. You change one field in the operator spec, and after 30 seconds, you have an environment running with Postgres. All the Postgres features are enabled in the UI. It's like magic. I was blown away on how well engineering executed on that one. You literally change a single word in OpenShift, save, boom, you're done. So, like Matthias likes to say, life is going to be a little bit more complex, I'm sure, for some of the folks, but migration is what we've been working on. So it should be seamless or
also
easy.
To add to that, the operator is currently a Helm-based operator. So our OpenShift operator is based on the Helm charts, which means we already are also building that into the Helm charts. That is not an operator thing with the auto upgrade, as far as I'm aware of. But I will follow up on this and let you know as soon as we have some version of documentation on that, or at least I got confirmation from our database folks.
Sounds good. That's the end of all the questions. If anybody on the call has anything else, speak now or forever hold your peace. Just kidding. You can always just post them in the Slack channel. Matthias, any fun facts, anything fun coming up other than the release, or are we just wrapping it up here? I think it's the end of your day, right? And it's the beginning of Oscars. So
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware of, nothing to report here. It's been quiet days after the code freeze. It's the usual development limbo, is it? Right after you wrap up one code freeze, and you just wait to start another iteration and make things better.
there you go. Yeah. And thanks for everyone for the questions. You are definitely helping make things better. Any issues that pop up as well. Looking for feedback, 4.0, Network Graph 2.0, collections feature, CoreOS scanning. So please let us know in the Slack channel. And thanks for 1 year of open source. Boaz, you were a little late to the party, but yeah, it's officially been 1 year. So it's, yeah, it's really, really cool. I know that there's some people that have been following since the beginning. So really appreciate all the help. And until next month, May on the second Tuesday, I'll post in the Slack channel. But again, Matthias Medinger, co-chair of StackRox, and myself, Michael Foster, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.